Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn with my intrepid co-host on the other coast, Stuart Tiffin.
Yeah, hey, I like the way that rhymes.
Good. Host and coast. So today we're going to be talking about a series that came out in 2019, and it is a BBC production, I believe. ITV. So, but then Hulu snatched it up, and it is 6 episodes total, and it is about a zombie apocalypse in Birmingham, England, and entitled ZOMBOAT. So you would imagine most of this takes place in a boat. And so we're going to talk about the first 3 episodes, but before we get into that, we have some news items to share with you. You want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. Number one is an article that caught caught my interest when I see the headline, Scott Gimple defends Fear the Walking Dead Season 5.
Can we just talk about how much Scott Gimple has been out there, like last week and this week? He has just been all over the place. So what do you think is happening with this? Because this is a lot.
This is also on Skybound, which is the parent company of Robert Kirkman, or his company, right? It's the comic publisher of The Walking Dead. And so this is an article in which the head content guy for The Walking Dead universe on TV and movies, I assume, is not apologizing, but defending the most recent season of Fear the Walking Dead, which we panned universally between the two of us. Yeah. Our universe of 2 panned it. Some other people didn't, I guess.
But we're the only universe. Come on, let's be honest here.
That's right. So he's saying, hey, you know, when you look at season 2 of The Walking Dead, some people thought that was bad, but then later they thought this isn't so bad.
No, that is not true. It was always bad. It will always be bad. I will never say that was a good season.
I can't believe that was his defense, though. And then when you look at Rotten Tomatoes, and this doesn't 100% prove my point. Rotten Tomatoes season 2 was an 81% critical response, which is actually really good. But the only reason why season 2 looks better in hindsight is because they came out with multiple seasons that were way worse than season 2.
Well, that's
true.
Season
7 and season 8, which are both in the 60%
they are
critical
pretty bad.
Consensus.
But it's not. But still, at face, it is not a good season. It's a terrible season. It's
not a good season.
And particularly because the first season was so great. So it's sort of like everybody had such high hopes, and then they just kind of destroyed it. And look, I think that there's lots of stuff that Fear the Walking Dead could do to recover, and I think there's some positive things, but some of the negative things that you and I have talked about, just I don't know, this was a slog. This was a tough thing to get through, and unless they do something drastic, like maybe get Angela Kane into the the steering wheel.
No, she needs to focus on her project, which is going very well.
I'm just saying that only her magic, I think, would help this series recover.
There have got to be lots of talented showrunners and storytellers who could do this just as well. I just think that they chose the wrong 2, or the 2 that they chose maybe have their arms tied behind their backs, or I don't know what could be making them make such bad decisions over and over again. But basically, since they've arrived on the show, we have not enjoyed it. And I went back and listened to some of our first reviews of season 4, and it's just you can really tell that there's new showrunners. And by the time, we basically have disliked Althea the entire time she's been on the show.
Oh, it's a
if you were wondering
character.
if there was ever a time when we liked Althea, there was never a time.
I was never wondering that, because I know that I've always hated her.
I wonder once in a while. I'm like, wonder if we actually liked her video camera stuff.
No, never.
Nope, we never have. Never liked it. They've got to figure out a new solution. And, as much as Gimple can get on Skybound, what a hostile interview that must have been, and say, oh, no, it's not so bad. I'm sorry. You're going to have to prove it. And if it's just as bad this season, the next, in season 6, I feel like the show has to end.
Well, right. He was also out there talking about multiple other things Walking Dead, but for both of the other shows. So we also had him out there confirming that the World Beyond is only going to be 20 episodes total.
like 2 seasons, 2 seasons
Right.
of 10 episodes, which I think is a good thing.
I think it's a good thing if they can contain it and they can actually like steer the course. Sure. Great. And I mean, I do think that we've seen this a lot with British television. BBC Office, and obviously not the American Office, did this. Multiple British shows tend to have this formula more so than American shows. Recently, Watchmen actually did this, and David Lindelof basically said, I'm not going to do, even though it was sort of left open and there was a lot of talk about the fact that they might do a second season of that, he basically was like, no, I'm not. Well, if they're going to do it, it's not going to be with me, because he basically had the idea mapped out in his head, had the idea that where he wanted it to go and where he wanted to end. And much like Watchmen, the graphic novel, just wanted to have basically an enclosed season and that's it. One
Good
story.
for him, because if he'd got sucked into another Lost scenario,
Well, and I think he's probably remembering that a lot. And he got
probably
I mean, look,
scarred for life.
and I admit I am one of the people that was just like when it was announced that he was going to be the person involved with this, I was like, "Oh, no." So, and I did imagine a scenario where he would go on and on forever with it and just sort of lose his way. So I actually think that he's learned a lot from the Lost scenario and just was like, "Nope, we're going to keep this story contained, tight." And I know that there's some critics of certain things about this series, but I thought he did an amazing job and I really enjoyed it, more so than I thought. And I actually delayed watching it because I was so worried that it was going to be terrible. And I really liked it. I thought that it
Talk
was a
about
great...
universal critiques. That was basically everybody loved that.
Right. But for me, because I don't know if you're a Watchmen fan, but I am definitely a Watchmen fan. Like I read that stuff when I was in junior high. Like it meant a lot to me as a kid. So the idea of it being a different thing, other than what Alan Moore put together, really worried me. So I was definitely, after a bunch of people said, no, you really need to watch this, I was finally like, okay, I will. And not only did I like it, but my husband liked it, who hates that kind of thing. All like, hands down, this is not his bag, and he was really into it. So, so in any case, that being said, I'm okay with the formula of something being a self-contained little story, or
as long as they have a good story to tell,
well,
and
correct.
a good way to wrap it up. Like as long as they don't screw up a third act, which is what commonly happens with other limited
Right.
stories, right?
Right.
They just have to have the right storytellers.
And as you and I have said, look, The Walking Dead has a bit of an issue with representing younger characters. We saw them struggle with a lot of them. So I hope that that's not going to be the case in a series where all of the characters are younger. So let's see what happens.
In the season we just finished reviewing, we just saw a bunch of their heads end up on pikes, right?
Yeah.
As in terms of the younger people of the community.
Right.
So let's hope that also does not end
Well,
up
I'm just
being
talking
their...
about the idiocy that we've seen with Carl and with Henry and with others, and it's just so I would like to see this be a little bit better in sort of that representation.
True.
But I'm willing to give it look, I'm cool with it being contained as long as they are, again, really thoughtful about how they do it and how they show it and how they end it. So we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, Gimple was all talking about bringing back long lost characters. And we've seen this a few times with like flashbacks or sort of delirium sequences with, various people are brought back. So we'll see what happens here. This particular article that we're going to throw in the show notes, a few of these are not even possible since, at least one of the actors is dead. But also some of the actors weren't totally thrilled about being killed off of the show. So I don't know that they're feeling the positive vibes about coming back. Steve Yeun was particularly not happy about being killed off. And he's off doing other stuff. So I don't know. We'll see what happens here. But what did you think about it?
Wait, who's dead?
The Scott Wilson is dead.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, yeah, they're not going to do a Herschel... Well, they could do a Herschel prequel, but no, because he's going to... No, you can't.
Not really.
They met him pretty early on. It wouldn't be a zombie story at all.
But that's the thing. Like, if you're going to bring back, like, a Beth, Herschel's definitely involved in that. What do you do? Bring a younger Herschel? Yeah. Recast him?
And she was in The Messiah, the new show on Netflix. and she is not that she's like aged, but she's a more mature version of herself.
Well, yeah.
You can't do a prequel with Beth, and now she's like at least 5 years older than she was at the beginning of the Walking Dead.
I don't know. Maybe they'll try to CGI that stuff, and it'll look weird.
God. Don't Irish it
Beth was Green. Pretty bad.
But yeah, the one that Paul Tassi, I think he's the one who wrote this article. The one that he thinks is most likely is Abraham Ford, and Cudlitz is kind of ageless. If you dye his hair orange and give him a the big mustache, he could pull it off.
Well, maybe they're just talking about bringing him back, and that's really the whole purpose of this article, and that's it. Because he's easy. He's directing. It's fine.
He's directing.
Yeah.
Sarah Wayne Callies also did not direct a single episode of Fear the Walking Dead in season 5. We talked about it while we were watching that season, because she was listed in Wikipedia.
Yep.
She was, I think, scheduled to direct an episode, and then she got picked up by another TV show and decided to drop some of her directorial commitments to focus on acting full time. So she was in the hopper to direct an episode. She did not, probably for her own good, because it was a garbage fire.
Yeah. Smart of her. So, quote unquote, she's focusing on acting.
She's focusing on her acting.
Good excuse. Good job. And lastly, in some sobering news, like we talked a little bit about this lovely Chinese coronavirus that's been happening. The good news was that they mapped it pretty quickly, and it seemed to be somewhat promising, at least as of last week when we talked about this, where it didn't seem like the transmission between animals and humans, or even human to human, was going to be so bad. But as of 3 hours ago, it jumped from, and I mean, obviously it jumped over the course of the week, but from 40 reported cases to now 221, I believe, which is a pretty fast rise. And now at U.S. airports, they are screening for this because clearly they are concerned about it. And the transmission is clearly a lot more easy than they thought it was. So yeah, another thing to terrify me while I'm thinking about other stuff. Like things like cause me anxiety. This is going to be one of them. I especially liked that they were screening at a lot of New York airports, so that makes me psyched.
But I mean, China's been having a rough go of it the last few weeks. We've been talking about the Black Death there. What was the non-SARS, non-MERS, or is this it?
This is it.
But reporting seems to be more open there now than in years past.
That is relative. Yes, I think open-ish is the best way to put it. But I gotta say, I think there were a lot more than 40 cases that they knew about, and I also think that they knew that the transmission was a lot worse than they were saying.
Get your hot takes on Chinese public health from H.A. Conrad right here on
I'm not talking about Chinese public health. I'm just talking about sort of generally how you see these kinds of things go through, and just watching like what the CDC does. This seems to be pretty fast to me. And you saw the article that the U.S. was starting to do screens for this earlier this week, which means this is fast. So I just think that probably they knew a little bit more than they were putting out there. And the message that they were putting out even just last week was like, be calm. This is not such a big deal. It's only people who are at these like fish markets, like I guess putting their face in a bucket of shrimp. I don't know. But now it's like, oh no, human to human, it's kind of going its way. It's coronavirusing.
It's in Beijing now too. I think.
It's more than Beijing. It's in several places. So I'm guessing that the 221 number is actually double that, if not more. And anyway, just get your sort of quarantine plan in place. Just saying. But that being said, when MERS came out, I was admittedly very nervous about that, but MERS didn't jump up in the transmission rate this fast. So hopefully, we will see a positive thing. I think the only good news is that the mortality rate for this doesn't seem to be as high as MERS, which is about 50% or something like that. This is, so far, 2 people have died that we know of, I guess. So it's not quite the same mortality rate that we were seeing. So let's hope they get a lid on it, and soon. But maybe we see next week that instead of screening, they're shutting down certain flights. So
I guess we will just have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah,
and,
so
keep your
keep your
keep
ears
your plastic
tuned here.
sheets and duct tape,
Ready.
nearby.
Ready. But on that note, let's jump into our recap and summary of the next of the first 3 episodes of
On a
ZOMBOAT.
much lighter note.
Yes.
Yeah. ZOMBOAT ! Was on ITV in early October, and then ITV2 October 8th, and then by October 18th it was on Hulu. So I think this must have been pre-planned.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I can see why, and I can see why Hulu snapped this up. This is fun. And each episode is about 25 minutes long.
Yeah.
Pretty small sort of like main cast, at least at this point.
Yeah, at this point. But they do introduce, at least in the first 3 episodes, you get to meet a couple of other people. At least in episodes 2 and 3. And in the first episode, you're really just meeting our 4 main heroes, which are sisters Joe and Kat. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Joe and Kat. And then friends, Sunny and Amar.
Yep.
And they are together making an odd couple, quartet rather. Through two sets of 2 people who know each other are getting thrown together in a wacky, zany zombie apocalypse.
Well, and I would also say 2 sets of people that are having some conflict outside of the zombie apocalypse together. So Kat and Joe are sisters. Joe is played by Cara Theobald, and I don't know, did you ever see Crazy Head?
Yes.
So she's
in
Amy.
that?
Yeah, she's Amy from Crazy Head, who is one of the leads, the lead who works at the bowling alley that discovers she's can see demons and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then I've not really seen the other actors in this, though all of them have been in a lot of British television shows, specifically Doctors, which they all seem to have in common.
They've all been doctors.
It's a show called Doctors that they've all been on.
Sorry. I just thought that was. I like Kat. Kat's character is awesome. Speaks to me because as a gamer, she's a dyed-in-the-wool online gamer. The show starts with her finding out this zombie apocalypse through chat.
Yep.
And then and also another interesting thing about the show is it is 100% read in on zombies.
Yep.
And so she's like, oh, zombie apocalypse? All right, I know what to do. She has a plan.
Yep.
And she starts to follow through on her plan.
And she's fun. And she's played by Leah Brotherhead. And then the 2 other characters are Sunny, played by Hamza Jitua, and Amar, played by Ryan McKen. And they're not related, but they're besties-ish.
Ish, yeah. It's more like Amar, Sunny puts up with Amar.
Yeah.
But as the season seems to be going along, we learn that
it may be the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It might just be the opposite. But they are a delight. Those 2 all their scenes are funny. Ryan McKen as Amar is just really
amazing.
Funny.
They're all really good. So I have to say,
banter between those 2.
The whole cast, really I think, is really good. So
the ideas for these characters are just good. They're all archetypes, sort of, and they just all work really well together. It feels like to me.
Yep. So it opens up with Kat discovering all about the fact that the zombie apocalypse is happening because she's playing one of her games and it's through chat, and then cuts to the outside where actual helicopters and all sorts of things are happening. And then her sister, while this is going on, is getting it on with some dude in the other room named Jude, I guess. And the sister is Joe is basically super she is definitely the opposite of Kat's gamer persona. She's into fashion and other stuff, and I don't know.
Yeah, she's just a kind of a stereotypical chick who's into partying and dudes, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit less defined, I think, than maybe Amar and Kat, certainly.
Yeah. And Kat's the nerdy sister who knows all about this. And there's some funny interactions between them because basically the dude that Joe is getting it on with, Jude, turns into a zombie, and pretty quickly they just jump in right away. And it's very clear that, this is a world where people know what's going on, or at least some people do. And Kat's oh, let's like we gotta like take care of this. And there's like lots of really funny moments. Definitely little moments where anybody who's like a zombie nerd is gonna like pick up on. And she references all sorts of different things. She references both games and, you know, zombie fiction and movies and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But it's pretty funny because she does have a plan in place, and her biggest plan is that they're going to go and get a boat and commandeer a boat, and because zombies can't swim, and that's how they're going to survive. And one of the funniest things she says to her sister is like, you know, you never read George Romero, and so you don't know any of this, but I'm not going to let you die. So there's like.
The funniest thing she said was Rick Grimes was an idiot, and
oh yeah,
Walking Dead would have ended in season 1 if he'd just gone to the Everglades.
Oh yeah, and she says this like multiple times, which I kind of love.
It is great. I love the fact that she just talks trash about Walking Dead, but she's also like, all right, they're Walking Dead speed zombies, not 28 Days Later zombies, and she's constantly like measuring out the situation based on, you know, fiction that we all know. So it's great.
But there's also like, it's a fun way to set up the canon for this, because, you know, for example, she doesn't know whether they can get down the stairs or not, and they do have a hard time negotiating stairs. They just kind of fall down them or whatever. And there's lots of like really funny moments, and it's totally like, I don't know, like just a pretty fun little jaunt for a zombie fan to watch.
It's definitely fan service for us. It's like made
absolutely.
for us. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then on the other side of this little quadrangle, we've got Sunny and Amar, who do cross paths very quickly with Kat and Joe just on the street because they're running to the train station. Not because there's a zombie apocalypse, because they're getting out of Dodge after an ill-conceived bachelor party, I guess. And just, they really don't know what is happening. They're just thinking their trains are delayed and that kind of thing. And they're also having a little bit of a spat just because Sonny really didn't want to come to this wonderful night. And he's kind of like, I don't know, like he's trying to play it cool. Like he was the guy that was just like, oh, I'm not into all of this and you guys are a bunch of idiots. But as you had mentioned earlier, there's really definitely a lot of signs that he was actually like kind of jerk of the night,
and was wasted and was puking on all the wrong things and people. So as the episodes go on, it definitely turns out that Amar was basically taking care of him.
And Amar's a good guy. I mean, he's kind of like, and he's just like a good-natured guy and is definitely trying to look out for his friend. But in this scenario, they're just waiting at the train station and sort of figure it out pretty quickly at this point that something isn't right, but it takes them a little longer.
It takes them a little too long.
Where they're definitely having to run to hide in the bathroom. They do know what zombies are, so that's kind of funny. And I like, you know, the other part of it is like this whole like, oh, like Amar's like, we got to get this on video and get a bunch of likes on social media and like leverage it and that kind of thing. So there's
also the good banter between Sonny and Amar, because Amar has, like, I guess recently gotten into fitness, or like he's become more about health and the way he looks, and so Sonny's constantly giving him a hard time for taking off his shirt or you know, whatever. Then that is like an ongoing thing too, but it's just a fun little quirk of their relationship. I'm not sure exactly how they get on the boat, but they end up on the canal boat.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't show that, but they just show them hiding in the bathroom again, and they hide in bathrooms a lot. So there's that. We should also mention that the boat is the boat of Joe's ex, because that does play into it, and her sister Kat knows that that Joe's ex has been kind of getting it on with some other girl, and that other girl is indeed on the boat. And so that their first zombie kill is actually this woman, Julie Johnson. And I did actually like their first zombie kill because it was very awkward and strange and and exactly,
it's like with a bread knife at first. I feel like they're not using the right implements, and when Kat first stabs Julie Johnson, the zombie, she's like, oh, I think I hit bone, and she's all grossed out, and I'm like, yeah, okay, this feels about right, you know?
Yep, and they, you know, and it's a hard kill, but then the zombies seem to die when you get them the heart versus head.
Yeah.
So
Which
there's
have they even addressed that as in canon yet?
they
I mean,
haven't
I'm
said
wondering
it
if
outright.
Kat has. Yeah.
They haven't said it outright, but it's definitely clearly something. Kat mentions that it seems like she should have died with the head thing, but
Yeah.
and I don't think it's totally just the head because later on, Joe kills a zombie just bludgeoning it in the head, and that seems to work. So maybe that's just part of it. That there's more than one way to kill him. But they basically that happens and it traumatizes Joe enough that she's like, well, I'm gonna go and get the police or whatever, and like somehow thinks that there's still help coming, and
Yeah.
her sister comes after her and rescues her, and it's actually yet another gamer thing. Like she sets off a car alarm, she knows what she's doing, and Joe like she's sort of like grudging about it, but she's like, okay, well, I hate it when she's right, and just kind of, and that's sort of like the end of the first episode where they decide to get into their gear, and
They also put on those weird leather outfits, which are pretty funny too. It's just like, all right, it's the end of the world. We have to wear black leather, but then they're like chafing and just a lot of nice little funny jokes that they don't overkill, and so yeah, they're good.
Yeah, and same thing with Sunny and Amar, because they like while they're on the run, they end up in this like weird phone booth, and they're trying to like get a hold of the police, and doing the whole thing like the package of the credit card and all that stuff is just really funny between them. And by the time they end up on the boat, all four of them, you have a pretty good sense of who they are as characters, I think, and they did a pretty good job of laying that out.
Yeah, in 25 minutes, they don't have a lot of time, but they pack in a lot in that first episode, and then by the time episode 2 starts, they're kind of in a standoff, but they're already moving at like 1 mile an hour, which is another just funny running joke of this show, is that the zombies, like Jude and several other recognizable zombies now who we've met, like the train conductor guy, the one they call, what is it, Indian Jesus or something. They're just following them along the sides of the canal because these boats move with like no wake. I don't know how fast they're going, but it's ridiculously slow, but still slightly. I think they even say it's like slightly faster than a zombie.
Right. But the only reasons that the zombies can't get them is just because they're in the water. And also at the end of the first episode, Rob does eventually come to his boat and sees that it's gone. So that's another plot point that I'm sure will eventually come back.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Another interesting point is they apparently start going in the opposite direction of London in the beginning.
Yes.
And this becomes clear in episode 2, so that Kat can enact part 2 of her plan, which is pick up her mentor from her online guild. Big
Dame Hero. So that gets us into episode 2. And there's also conflict between the two different couples, or the pairs, I guess you would call it, in episode 2, because basically Kat and Joe don't know who Amar and Sunny are. They don't really want them on the boat, and there's like there's definitely conflict there, where they're sort of taking sides. It's interesting though, because they do need the help of more than just the two of them, because they have a bunch of locks to get through. So there's that part of it. But it's also all the discussion that, again, it's fan service to some extent, because like you talk about who would be great on your team in a zombie apocalypse. So Sunny is constantly accused of being lazy, and he kind of is. At least Amar is helpful and has his muscles, even though he takes his shirt off all the time. That's actually pretty funny.
It is funny.
And so he's actually trying to help get the boat through the locks. So there's a lot that they set up in this episode just to see the sort of initial conflict between the two pairs, and then how the journey sort of opens up from there. I do think that some of it is a little bit unbelievable, just because I don't know, like you just met these two people, and I don't know that Amar and Joe would necessarily go off together that quickly. And that was sort of my gut on that. What did you think about that?
Yeah, okay, so Joe is not really read in on the whole apocalypse yet. She definitely has one foot in civilization still. So yeah, she probably wouldn't feel comfortable going off with Amar.
Right.
But on the other hand, if her other foot is in the apocalypse, she'd rather have a big dude with her. I think.
Maybe. But, she still, even though she and Kat fight a little bit, she still trusts Kat more. But that said, it does serve a purpose, and the purpose is to get her and Amar off together and to have Sunny and Kat together. And Amar and Joe...
Those are the shipping lines that have been drawn to.
Yep. Amar and Joe go to find her phone. And then also, as it turns out, which shouldn't be a surprise because of how many times she's mentioned him, Joe also wants to go and find her ex-boyfriend Rob and see what happened to him and see if they can save him. And then Sunny and Kat stay on the boat. And they are getting or waiting for Big Dame Hero, who is the leader of the little guild that they got going on. And Sunny's calling Kat out because he's just like, look, have you ever met anybody on the internet before? And he's really like laying into Kat for being naive. And also
she's listing all these attributes that Big Dame Hero supposedly has, like crossbow, champion of the county, a boat expert. You know, and he's just like, okay, sure, yeah, just get ready to be disappointed. And then when the reveal happens, this woman appears on the side of the canal, and she's like attractive, looks fit. It's not a big fat dude, which is what I think everybody was expecting.
Yep, she's definitely.
You're like, oh wow,
she's definitely like pretty cool looking. And she jumps on the boat, starts taking charge. Kat's immediately like, all hero worship be of her.
Yeah.
Sunny's still very skeptical, and it turns out he has a reason to be, and ultimately he's proven right in that he basically kind of called it, because she isn't Big Dame Hero. She's somebody else, and
this was a nice tie-in, because when Kat is describing how she came to idolize Big Dame Hero, it's because she got her out of an abusive relationship with a bear. It's like this absurd story that would only happen online.
Right.
But she was in... So she talks about how Big Dame Hero saved her with this catchphrase, connection terminated or something like that.
Yep.
And then we learn, ultimately, spoilers, etc., that the woman who was gotten on the boat is not Big Dame Hero. Big Dame Hero was apparently everything that Kat made her out to be, but didn't survive the zombie apocalypse, and that this is actually the bear, Grizzly Karen. Grizzly?
Yeah, something
Grizzly
like
Karen.
that.
And is basically her nemesis from the online game instead of her hero. And
right. And
it's just, I thought that was a pretty cool way to loop that in. Again, in 23 minutes.
Pretty slick. And also, look, we've got like everything going on that you would expect in this kind of a show, because Grizzly Karen, or as we must call her but now, is on the boat and hiding the fact that she's been bitten. Sunny's the one who discovers this. There's a lot of denial on Kat's part that this is happening. And Sunny really does, he basically lays out every piece of evidence. This is so fast. So it's done pretty well. And then comes to a resolution pretty quickly. So Kat ends up like killing her and throwing her off the boat, and then is...
But you gotta go into more detail, because first she does the catchphrase of connection terminated. Is that what it is? Or
something like that. But she doesn't
and shoots
do
her in the leg,
and
then
doesn't work.
Reloads the crossbow and quickly says it again.
Yep.
I just love the way that was, the physical acting comedy there was really funny.
It was really great. But what this all serves is that now she trusts Sunny a lot more. She brings him back on the boat. There's definitely a bonding between them that happens here, and a trust that is built. So again, in 23 minutes, I feel like they do a really good job at storytelling on every level. The weak part of this whole story, I thought, was the whole thing between Joe and Amar. We get all the sort of information that we need to from Joe about the fact that she's been kind of stalking her ex-boyfriend. She's pissed that he was with this other woman. And Amar's kind of calling her out on it. But the scenario they end up in the car, I just felt like was like a little too ridiculous. Like they end up in the neighbor's car, who is kind of a perv, and they're trying to escape.
Says he's lovely at the end of the episode.
Yeah, but according to Joe, he's been trying to get her in the car since she was like a kid, which is gross. And there's this whole point where they like silly and fine, but they like hit a crossing guard and somehow he gets wedged under the car tire. And maybe it's possible with these little cars, but that was the only part that I was like, okay, this is just a little silly.
And so when you have the moment between Kat and Sunny where he's convinced, he helps her get past Grizzly Karen, and like, they bond over that. Amar and Joe bond over the fact that Joe is like a psycho ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
And Amar is just telling her like, oh yeah, I get it. They basically have a moment of bonding over how basic they both are.
Yeah, that's true.
To me. So yeah, they bond, but it's still like, it's lacking. But then their characters are a little bit like that.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, Amar is more of both couples are incrementally closer by the end of this episode. And so like we keep saying, well done. ITV2, good job. Right.
And I mean, I will say that it's interesting because they go through all this stuff. They get rid of this fifth character before like Joe and Amar come back right at the end of the resolution of this, and they never even get to interact with her. So then it's like, they dispatch this character. All right, moving on. And they jump back on that boat and they go, and very slowly into the next episode.
And it's again, like a laugh out loud. Like by the time this episode begins, they are literally just back to where they started in episode 1. Because they've turned around and are heading towards London. Kat in the previous episode has laid out that there are 163 locks. They have to go through multiple big towns, including Milton Keynes, which I don't know what really the significance of that is anymore, but it used to be like a big housing area, so there's probably a lot of zombies there, I assume is what she is referencing when she talks about Milton Keynes.
Part of it's a little bit of an inside joke, because it was supposed to be like the perfect sort of like housing place and whatever, and it just turned out to be very depressing. So it's actually like in the UK, it's like an inside joke, I think.
That's my knowledge of it from like many years ago. I don't know what it is today.
Yep. So I have no idea either. Also, just clearly we're not from the UK, so we probably don't know all the inside jokes.
We don't get all the jokes
that goes along with it. But anyway, I like that they also established that the roads are not a thing to be on, I guess, with this very weird little moment with the car where only one zombie is able to totally take down one car. So Amar says like, roads are not good and all this kind of thing. So we know they're going to end up on the boat for hopefully the remainder of the show. So they go back to where they originally docked, and they're going to go the opposite direction to London. But in the meantime, they see the hotel where the stag party was that Amar and Sunny had come from. And they have moments of guilt where they feel like they need to check on their buddies. And
they're also, the hotel is right there where they first got on the boat, apparently.
Right.
That they hadn't noticed that to begin with is a little odd, but so they just take a right and park in front of the hotel. And I think that this is like a good side quest. Mm-hmm. And again, an amazing little feature of this episode is every time Kat sees a sign that says level 1,
we hear the little noise.
There's a little ding in her head. And this whole episode, she's like picking up power-ups and pizza bonus quests and stuff. Oh God, I do enjoy it. So
yeah, it was fun. But also, just because they have to, they leave Joe behind, who's supposed to be watching the boat, but she really wants a shower because that's who she is. And so she is about to take a shower on the boat, but then decides to just go into the hotel. And there's like this whole funny little scene where she's like pampering herself. But then it's all for naught, because when she comes back out, she immediately gets chased and also then dirtied by a splatty zombie on the sidewalk. So there's that.
We meet a couple of the Stag Night guys, Kieran, who is always drunk and is dressed like Donald Trump.
Yep.
There's Grizz or Chris, I couldn't tell, and he's dressed like Elton John. All the Stag Night guys are dressed up, which makes them into funny zombies.
There's Mo, who's like a soccer football zombie. And then ultimately the Bachelor, Gav, who's like still chained up on the roof, is supposed to be dressed like
Emma Watson.
Yeah, Emma Watson. So, but it's a little bit of a quest to the hotel. We learn a lot more about Sunny and Amar and what has happened leading up to this. And we also see like a flashback at some point where like Sunny is really just not into all of this. He's kind of tired of this group of people. Clearly he's a little bit tired of Amar. And this is definitely, he was reluctantly going into this thing, which also explains his bad behavior, but he also doesn't remember how bad his behavior was. And like, seriously, Amar's a really good friend, because basically Sonny has been puking and pooping his way through Birmingham. And I don't know how
and
many
Amar has
people...
been picking up the pieces all the way.
Yeah, and Amar's just stood by him and still clearly wants to hang out with him. And so it's sort of like, all right, well, there's loyalty, and Amar, you learn a lot about this relationship in this episode. And there's also definitely bonding between those two and Kat. And she's the one who kind of leads them through this, despite all the difficulties. There's a lot of funny banter about like the stag night and burlesque and that kind of thing.
You don't know what burlesque means, Steve.
Right.
Oh god, yeah, it's just a funny show. Like,
yeah,
I find
good.
myself chuckling along, and I'm a little bit bummed there's only 6 episodes, but again, like we were talking about earlier, a limited run is sometimes the best thing you can do for a show.
Well, and also with a show like this, and especially with the sort of sense of humor that they're having with it, maybe 6 is a good limit.
Yeah.
And
if this went on for 20 episodes, I think the video game jokes might get a little old too. Yeah.
Right. And again, they introduce like a couple new characters, or at least human characters, Gav and Kieran, and they both disappear at the end of the episode. They're like, oh, we're just going to try to make a run for it on the roads, and then like
Gav's trying to make it to his wedding, which is supposed to be like on Monday or something.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, we're just gonna drive. See ya. Thanks for the help. And then they walk around a corner. I half expected them to both get eaten. Like,
yeah, I thought they were gonna probably show that immediately, and they didn't. But it again leaves our little like quadrangle together. And they kind of like shrug their shoulders, and there's definitely, I mean, at the end of every episode thus far, there's been just more bonding between the 4 of them. So
yeah,
they seem increasingly like a team versus just 4 strangers. So
well, yeah, when Gav and Kieran are like opt out of going with Amar and Sunny, you're like, oh, okay, so Sunny and Amar would prefer to be with these 2 women who they just met this day, effectively, than these 2 other guys that they know. And Amar even admits, he's like, well, Gav wants to see if his wife is still alive or his fiance, and let's face it, Kieran's kind of an asshole.
But that's the thing. It's like, then that is kind of an interesting thing, because that kind of means that Sunny is right about those guys. Yeah. And that's kind of what Sunny's been saying all along, is that these guys are not really my cup of tea. And, so there's that. And then that makes you question, like, why did they even go back to the hotel? But whatever, I guess that you got a fun little interlude.
But there was a lot of that kind of back and forth, like, hey, Kieran would have done it for us. And Sonny's like, no, he wouldn't. He would have gotten drunk or something. I don't know.
And when you meet Kieran, you're like, oh yeah, clearly that's what happened. And also, Kieran left everybody out to become zombies. Like, he went and hid in his room. So basically, Sonny is correct on that point. So anyway, but I'm thoroughly enjoying this show. I'm going to look forward to watching the next 3 and talking about it with you next time.
Yeah, this is definitely a lot of fun to watch. If you haven't watched it already, and we've kind of just spoiled the first 3 episodes, hurry up and watch the rest of the season before we get to that next time on Reanimated.
But honestly, I think you can watch this even with the spoilers. I still think it's fun. So
yeah, the jokes are very jokey and good. And if you're a fan of zombie stuff, this is for you for sure.
Yeah, and the writing is good, and the casting is great. So I say go for it, and hopefully you'll catch up and let us know what you think about it. And if you'd like to leave us a note, please send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or on Twitter, reanimatedpcast, or you can leave a note on our site, which is reanimatedpodcast.com.
You got it.
I got it again. Yes. And until next time, ciao, and thanks for listening.
Thanks. Bye.